So I'm going to turn this over to Diane Leffler, who will be the lead moderator for this evening, and we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And I would like to extend my own welcome to all those in attendance and those who are watching us online. Before we get started tonight, there are some people here who I would like to thank. First off, I'd like to thank Casey Jones and Barbara Bell from the local chapter of the League of Women Voters. They will be serving as our timekeepers tonight and keeping everything on track. And also, if you didn't see on the way in, the League has a table set up just outside where you can register to vote. So if you need to get registered, I would urge you to take advantage of that opportunity. I'd also like to thank Friends University, who have been very attentive to all of our needs. And last, but certainly not least, you may have noticed that the woman who introduced me has the same last name as I do, my lovely wife, Kathy. And I can attest to the long days of hard work that she has put in to make this event and last night's District 3 Forum possible. So let's please give all their helpers a round of applause. Thank you so much. Tonight's format, each candidate will be given 2 minutes to make an opening statement. The order in which statements will be made was decided by a coin flip before the forum, and Jeff Blubaugh has decided to go first. Sarah Lopez has decided to take the last word in our debate. So we'll be having 1 minute closing statements at the end of the debate. I would ask that we keep our applause. I know I just asked for applause, but if we can keep our applause until the end of the debate, when we'll applaud both candidates. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer questions, and when both have spoken, each will get 30 seconds of response time. We'll begin this evening with questions for members of the Journalism Collaborative, the Wichita Journalism Collaborative, and then we will be opening the mic to you in the audience. So without further ado, Mr. Blubaugh, your opening statement, please.
Well, thank you very much, and I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Specifically, I want to thank the Journalism Collaborative, I want to thank the Friends University, and I want to thank the League of Women Voters. Appreciate you guys putting this forum on. It's great to be back here at Friends University. I was actually out here this morning. Dr. Carey invited me to their breakfast they do annually and kind of give them updates here, so I appreciate that. I've lived here in Wichita for the last 30 years, worked out at Cessna for almost 17 years, and I wanted to serve more in the community. Started out coaching junior football out in Goddard, got on the school board out in Goddard, eventually got on the Wichita City Council, was on the council for 11 years, and we got a lot of stuff done. We were able to get 235 Kellogg, able to build a ballpark, we built an airport, we did Meridian, Seneca, West Street, we've done most of the major arterials. We have plans to finish out K42. And a lot of these projects we did when there was no inflation and interest rates were low. There's a time and a place for things. Right now, as I'm out door knocking, people are struggling. Property taxes are the #1 issue. I hear it time and time again. People point out to me, our neighbors are losing their house. We're behind on our payment, and it gets back to the property tax and the property tax assessment. We've got to have a fair assessment of value. I'm a real estate broker, and usually when I look at the tax values, it used to be, well, you know, those tax values are well under the sales price. Right now, when I look at the numbers, you normally cannot sell those properties for what the tax value is. So we've got to ensure we have a realistic assessment value for property taxes.
And Ms. Lopez.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Lopez. It has truly been just an honor of a lifetime to be able to serve as a 2nd District Sedgwick County Commissioner for the last 4 years. I ran because really I just wanted to leave this community better than I found it for my kids and for their generation. And I'm really proud of the work that we've been able to accomplish over the last 4 years. When I first started, the county was in a bad place. We were about 65% staffed overall. I mean, you just can't run an effective organization at that staffing level. I'm really happy to say that today we're at 85 to 90% staffed overall, and that's through better wages, better benefits, like the 8-week paid parental leave policy for both parents that we were able to pass. And so we were able to improve the services because we've invested in our people, and our services are only as good as the people who provide them. But at the same time of improving services, we were also able to lower the mill levy, not just once, but 2 times. Right now, the mill levy going into 25 is going to be the lowest it's been at the county in nearly 30 years. And so being able to improve those services and lower that mill levy was incredibly important to all of the commissioners, and I'm really grateful that we could do that. Another thing that I'm really proud of that we've been able to get done is a new regional mental health hospital. That's something that's been discussed for almost a decade. Right now, the largest mental health hospital in town is the jail, and that's not good enough for our community. The people that live here deserve better than that, and they deserve access to the resources they need. Not only is that really important that we have that hospital, but getting it in South Wichita means over $100 million of investment on the south side and over 350 well-paying jobs. And I can't tell you the last time that that's happened south of Kellogg. So I'm really happy that we're able to do those things. And I'm just looking forward to this conversation. And thank you all for being here tonight. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you very much. Sarah, since Jeff went first, I'm going to ask the first question to you first. It goes right to the heart of an issue that's very important to us all. More than 40% of the county's budget is reliant on property taxes, yet there is growing support on the commission to reduce that burden even further. And do you support reducing property taxes? And if so, how would you continue to fund county government services that we all need?
Sure. Well, we don't control the property valuations. That's done at the state level. That's not something that you guys would want us to control. But yes, I think it's really important. People are being, like Jeff said, people are being taxed out of their homes, and it's really important that we address those concerns. We have cut the mill levy twice. There's a lot of conversation right now around what does that shifting of taxation look like. The way I see it is if we want long-term transformational change at local government, it's not going to come from a sales tax over property tax, because that's just shifting the burden from one to the other. But it's really going to come down to functional consolidation of services between the cities and the county. There's so many duplication of efforts right now. One great example is there's 2 property and evidence buildings. Do we need 2 property and evidence buildings and 2 sets of staff and 2 IT systems? No, we don't. We can consolidate that one thing pretty easily. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, and we are creating a blue ribbon committee to look at really what consolidation efforts make sense that will improve services and decrease taxes.
And Jeff, if you'd like me to restate the question, or more than 40% of the county's budget is reliant on property taxes, yet there is growing support on the commission to reduce the burden of property taxes on county residents. Do you support reducing property taxes, and if so, how would you continue to fund county government?
I do believe we do have to pay property taxes, but we need to ensure.
Have we lost a mic there?
And we need to ensure that we have a fair and equitable assessment process. And I'm going to talk a lot about that tonight. If you look at commercial property in 2020, 2021, and 2022, and if you went and protested your property taxes on it, Sedgwick County does work with you. Their stipulation rate is a lot higher than most counties here in the state of Kansas. But if you can't work it out with that property tax assessor, you have a 1% chance if you go to the municipal court or you go to the Board of Tax Appeals of getting approved. They haven't even heard 23 or 24 yet. This is 2020, 21, and 2022. 2 of the years were 100%. You have 0 chance. We have to have a check and balance of the property tax system. And it's something we can put on the legislative agenda at the county and make sure that our legislators know that we need to do a legislative review as to why only less than 1% of commercial property taxes are lowered at the vote and municipal court levels. It's just not a fair.
Okay, Sarah, you have 30 seconds.
I don't disagree that our system could be flawed, but I don't think that that's a county commission responsibility. we are not in control of your valuation property, and we shouldn't be, because that's how favors can be done for friends. And so to keep things fair and equitable, it needs to be away from the commission, and the appraiser handles that, and he works for the state.
I do believe that it's absolutely the position of the Sedgwick County Commission to put it on our legislative agenda and let Topeka know that these values are not they're not market values. They're false values. And you look at some of these 100%, 200% increases, and it goes to Topeka, and there's a 1% chance of it being changed. No, you can't tell me that that appraiser 99% of the time always knows exactly what the use of that property, the exact condition. You're not getting that by a drive-by, and you're not getting that from, doing a vast property assessment of hundreds of thousands of properties.
Okay. Well, tonight, members of the Wichita Journalism Collaborative will be asking some of the questions, and I'll ask Zena Taher of KSN News to come to the microphone with the first of our panel questions.
Okay, so the first question is, Wichita has announced it will soon be cracking down on the city's homelessness population with an ordinance that has a more aggressive approach towards clearing encampments and restricting use of public sidewalks. Do you support or oppose this approach, and why?
Jeff,
Do we support the more public sidewalks for schools? Is that what we're saying? Is that the question, basically?
the question is...
Yeah, and I think when I was on the Goddard School Board, we had grant opportunities to where we could work with the city of Goddard to be able to, it's one of those collaboration deals, especially as we go into potential recession. We have to look at more collaboration. What can you do with the city, with the school district, with the county, with the state? There's a lot of leverage you can do, and that was one thing that we were able to do in Goddard, and I tried to work that. I know that we have an issue between the city of Wichita and Hayesville where we have 1 mile of sidewalk that we need to be able to connect them, and that's something
Jeff,
we've got to work.
I'm sorry. I think you may have misunderstood the question.
Okay.
The question went to that the city is going to be cracking, the city of Wichita specifically, is going to be cracking down on the homeless population. And they have an ordinance in the works to take a more aggressive approach to clearing encampments and to restricting the use of public sidewalks.
Okay.
So,
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood
yeah,
that completely.
okay.
I heard sidewalks in schools, so I
Okay.
apologize. We do have to have some boundaries with the homeless. You know, whenever I was first on the Wichita City Council in 2013, we'd started the homeless outreach team, and what has happened is it's just brought in more and more homeless. And as I'm out knocking doors, especially in neighborhoods just north of here, they'll tell me there's been homeless living in their backyards for 30 days before they even know it. And there's a lot of invasive, a lot of people send me some pretty bad pictures that happen around some of these city sidewalks. So I do think that we need to align with some boundaries.
Okay. Sarah, would you like me to restate the question for you?
Yes, please.
Okay. Wichita has announced it will soon be cracking down on the city's homeless population with an ordinance taking a more aggressive approach to clearing encampments and restricting the use of public sidewalks. Do you support or oppose this approach, and why or why not?
Sure. I think it's a little too early to have an opinion on that, because right now, if we did that, where do we take them? There is not a place that we can move them for their safety or for the safety of others. This is really relying on the city and not necessarily the county, but I do think that we need to be good partners when it comes to our homeless community. We are better than what we see in our streets today. The people that live here deserve better than what we are giving them. I'm really excited about the MAC that's coming, because we'll be able to have a place that people can come. We can wrap those services around them. But I also think on the other side of this, there's an economic impact to homelessness. I mean, we are spending millions of dollars annually to address this concern, and if we could shift those dollars to prevention instead of just in the back end, I think it significantly changes what things look like going forward.
Okay, Jeff, 30 seconds.
And this is another big collaboration opportunity we have. You know, you used to look at, well, the county did all the mental health and the city handled all the homelessness. Then, you know, the county's getting into with the Joint Task Force and other initiatives, starting to work with the homeless, and you see the city getting into the mental health a little bit more. I think we need to have defined arenas as to what exactly our responsibilities are there.
And also, just to add on to that, I think it's really important to remember that the county has the public health department, and homelessness really is a health issue for people. And so we need to make sure that people have the resources they need to live a healthy life. And on the basic needs, on that lowest tier of that pyramid is housing and shelter and food. And so we need to make sure that those things are provided for. And if we can be of assistance, if we can help partner with the city, we are at the table to have those conversations, but we'll see how it goes forward, especially as the MAC continues to be discussed.
Okay, I'm going to invoke moderator privilege here, and I wanted to ask both of you, take 30 seconds on this one, just where you see the roles of, where you see the role of the county fitting into the issue of housing in the community. Sarah, if you...
Sure. So we used to both have, the city and county both had housing departments, and about 6 years ago we consolidated and putting that under the city of Wichita. So we still give money, about $1.7 million annually, that goes through ComCare to the housing programs at the city, so we are still very much engaged with that. I think that there's a lot of conversations now looking at the whole picture between homelessness and housing, and how do we draw those lines, but how do we do it in a collaborative way? Because for a long time, like Jeff said, it's very, this is us and this is them, but homelessness is not a city of Wichita issue. It is a community issue, and we all need to be at the table to have those results.
Jeff?
Whenever it comes to the county standpoint and just handing it over to the city housing department, I think the county needs to have more oversight on that, because I've watched the city housing administration through my term on the council, and I've seen a lot of great ideas that didn't come to fruition. I think of the RAD program, I think of the land bank, I think of things like that. I think of some of the mystery spending whenever we had all the ARPA money and going out and funding this nonprofit. So I hope that the county has more of an oversight on those processes.
Thank you very much. One thing that I probably should mention as well is that Sarah Lopez is our incumbent commissioner from the 2nd District, and Jeff Blubaugh here has served several terms on the City Council, so the Wichita City Council. So I just wanted to get that out of the way before we go to our next question, which will be from Allison Campbell of the Wichita State University Sunflower, another of our collaborative partners.
Hi, good evening. Thank you both for being here again. So off-campus rents have risen dramatically over the last few years, especially for students. That has made pursuing a degree even more expensive than it already is. What would you do as county commissioner to make sure that students can find safe and affordable housing?
Jeff, I believe, wait, no. Yeah, Jeff, it's yours.
You know, housing is an issue for everybody, whether you were raised here or whether you come in from out of state. And I'm still going to go back to the assessment process. One thing we can do as a county is we can ensure that, you know, we have a good property value, but also we ensure that we're following the Kansas Landlord-Tenant Act. Whether you're a landlord or a tenant, we got to make sure that the public knows what the rights are of both of those groups. And a lot of times those students are going to be renting versus buying property. So I think that's one of the things we can do for sure.
Do you mind repeating that one more time?
Sure. Off-campus rents have risen dramatically over the past few years for students. That has made pursuing a degree even more expensive. And what would you do as a county commissioner to make sure students can find safe and affordable housing?
Sure. So one thing that we have in our toolkit that's relatively new is something called Rural Housing Incentive Districts, RHID for short. And that's really a program that was created for rural areas that, say you have an Amazon plant, but we don't have the workforce or the housing for a workforce to run that. They actually opened up the law, so now Sedgwick County can engage in that process now as well. So we can look at those incentives to help find ways that we can infill different projects to help developers who might not otherwise be able to do it if not for that. Make it sure that it's affordable. These rules are kind of open and broad, but the county as it sits today, we have said that we want to make it for affordable housing, for infill, and so where their infrastructure is already around and not suburban sprawl. So I think between using that and then being able to do functional consolidation, which will lower that tax burden, and then other things like having fire and, sorry, I'm being told to stop, but there are different ways that we're doing to help lower that, so then hopefully property owners don't continue to increase the rates.
Jeff, 30 seconds.
Sarah just brought up a very important point. It's the RHID, and it's one of the greatest tools that we have. We just got to ensure that we leverage it right and that we're developing areas that aren't developing on their own. When I first got on the council, I was like, yeah, let's develop all these areas for affordable housing out in the suburbs. And, developers were all out of it, and then you try to bring them back into the core, and a lot of times there's just too much bureaucracy, too much red tape, too much zoning issues. You can build these properties out in the suburbs that you cannot build in the core, and the core is where we've got to have the housing.
And Sarah, 30.
I think just to finish that thought, we do stuff like with the big ditch and providing fire to people around. And I think doing those things helps decrease those insurance valuations. And so if we can help the property owners keep the taxes as low as possible, then hopefully they won't have to increase raises as quickly as they are and can keep those properties a little bit more manageable.
Thank you. One of our collaborative partners, Claudia Morrow, of the Spanish language publication Planeta Venus, originally planned to be here with us tonight, but she was unable to attend. So the next question will be asked by Michael Rohrman of the Wichita Eagle.
Good evening. The greatest need in the housing market in the Wichita area is for starter homes, but most of the new construction taking place is at the upper end of the housing scale, either expensive designer homes or luxury apartments and duplexes primarily aimed at the high rental market. Many of these projects are supported with government subsidies in one form or another. What should and what can the county do to help address this imbalance between the housing people need and the housing that's being built?
Well, I think that's a really, really great question, and one that we're working on trying to get an answer for. We know that we're about 30 to 50,000 units short. That's from our county appraiser. But what does that mean exactly? What kind of units are we short? What is the price point for those units? And so we are working, the homelessness task force that I'm on, we are working with PPMC, with WSU to create a study that's a housing inventory study. It'd be really hard for me to sit here and tell you I have the answers to this when I don't have all of the data. So we're working to try to get that. It should be done by the end of the year, and then we'll be able to create the process to see what does that even look like, where are we short, and where is it appropriate that we're a part of that.
Jeff, 1 minute.
New home ownership is just a key and a foundation to having a thriving economy, and that's one thing that we're going in the wrong direction. Whenever you see home ownership start to go under 60%, it's scary, and we're headed down that trend right now. I work with a lot of first-time buyers, and what happens is they go in there, they purchase their property, and then the second year they own the property, their insurance is maybe doubled because it's no longer a new home, and the interest rate may be variable, and the property taxes have probably $200 or $300 more a month than what they were before, because if it was a new house, it didn't have much of an assessment value. So we've got to do everything we can to break down the barriers to home ownership. And we see a generation right now. When are people going to buy their first home? Maybe it's not in their 20s. Is it in their 30s? Is it their 40s? Is it, we're seeing a lot of people right now move in to a side of a duplex. Is that your permanent home?
I also think continuing to grow our economy is really important, because right now 25% of our homes are making less than $35,000 a year, and 1 in 4 are also spending over 30% of their income on housing. So if we can grow our economy, if we can get better paying jobs for our communities, then that also helps with this. But it's a very complex situation.
And Jeff, 30 seconds.
Just say again, we need to do everything we can to work with these first-time buyers. It's a very struggling market right now. We've got to make sure that they have the available tools and the education and knowledge to understand what the responsibilities include in saving up to purchase a house and actually going through, and what that year 2 to 3 looks like with that house payment.
All right, thank you. I'm going to ask another question now. One of the factors that is often forgotten in housing strategy is transportation. Unlike many other metro areas, Wichita's buses don't run to the suburban cities or the unincorporated areas. We have no light rail. We have no commuter park and ride sort of service. Also, what low-cost housing there is generally isolated in pockets that make it difficult for people who can't afford cars to commute to jobs or access basic necessities such as grocery stores. How would you see transportation fitting into an overall regional housing strategy? And what role do you believe the county should have in regional transportation planning via the Wichita Area Metropolitan Planning Organization and other avenues? And I believe, Jeff, you have the first go on this.
When I was first elected to council, I thought that, we didn't have a lot of bus routes down south, and this was going to be something that was very important to the district. And I advocated for it, and unfortunately, I didn't find the need. We used to keep hearing about all these second and third shift workers at all the aircraft companies and how they'd take the bus and how they'd, use public transportation, and it really never came to fruition. I do know that there's a need out there, and I think we've just got to go back to the drawing board. And I think it's a city-county thing, because you put people right outside of our suburbs, and we need to ensure that they do have a way to get to work. And how can they get to the grocery store? And how can they get to the doctor's appointment? We've got to ensure that we have some kind of public transportation model. I don't know exactly what that looks like down south, but I'd certainly like to address it again. I will say that I didn't find the need whenever I was trying to work it from the city, but I do know that there is a need out there.
Thank you.
I
Sarah?
think it's a really great question. So we've been kind of struggling with that too. I mean, we're seeing organizations like Integra coming in, and part of the things that they have to have is transportation to get the grants that they're going for. And so we're trying to figure out a way that we can do a regional transportation study to see what exactly is the need. How can we address that? How can we get not just the city of Wichita, not just Sedgwick County, but all of our outlying cities engaged in this, and our business community, because it's going to impact them pretty tremendously as well. Right now, transportation is a city-led part, but we do have the aging department within the county. We do rides for unincorporated Sedgwick County for people who need help getting to a doctor appointment or to pick up their medicine, and it's a very cheap, flat rate, one way there and one way back. So we are trying to help with that, but I do think that there is a greater need, and there is more conversations that are happening, but they are starting to figure out what does that regional approach look like, and how can we all be at the table to get there.
And Jeff, 30 seconds.
Just agree that it's got to be, it's not just the county or the city, it's got to be a collaborative effort, absolutely.
And Sarah?
Well, and I guess I could just add, there are cities that are doing this internally, like Hayesville has a Hayesville Hustle, which is a great resource for our community. That's where I live, so I see them a lot. But they're just all kind of siloed, and if you have somebody in Wichita that needs to get to Hayesville or vice versa, there's really not a service that can provide that. So I think we have a lot of room for improvement when it comes to transportation.
Thank you both. We have another question from one of our collaborative partners. This is Meg Britton Mellish, and she is with the Wichita Beacon. The floor is yours.
Hi there. So we touched on this a little bit already, but just to dive deeper, much of the county, especially in rural and suburban areas, is not currently zoned to allow multifamily properties. Would you be in favor or opposed to allowing higher density zoning in some parts of your district to increase the number and potentially the affordability of homes to be built there?
Yeah, zoning cases are really, they're hard because they're emotional, and because we really have to balance property rights versus the rights of the community and the area that that's in. That being said, we need more housing. We are desperately in need of housing. So what does that mean? That means we're going to have to change zoning. That's the reality of it. unincorporated Sedgwick County is significantly growing. More and more people are living there. So that means the only way that we're going to get to the housing that's going to be needed besides infill is to change and allow for multifamily housing dwellings to take place, because we can't just think that everybody's going to fit in the core of Wichita. We have to make sure that there's availability, and at least it's a possibility to move outside of that as well.
I do agree that, you know, we've got to look at some kind of zoning changes, because we do need the lot density. It's so expensive to go in there and try to do a development. By the time you do the water, the sewer, the street, the concrete, the specials, I mean, you really want to ensure that you're getting as many units on that property as what you can. Otherwise, it's cost prohibitive. A few years back, I don't know if you guys remember the People with Places. That was something that I was pushing the city manager on. I will say that we had a lot of good ideas that didn't come to fruition. And one of them was accessory dwellings. A lot of them was, you know, just different tools that someone could use. Maybe you have your elderly parents, or, you know, you have a child or something that's outgrown living with mom and dad. We need to be able to create opportunities for people to build on their own property and to exercise their property rights.
And I would just add, I think when we get that housing study, it's really going to highlight what the actual need is. So for us to say that we want this area in Sedgwick County to have this kind of zoning, it's premature at the moment. So until we have all the data and all the facts, it'd be really hard to come up with a concrete solution of what's going to be going forward. But I'm not, if the question is if I'm opposed or not opposed, I'm not opposed to changing the zoning to make that more accessible.
And Jeff, 30 seconds.
This is the challenge that whenever I brought all the developers in to try to do core development, and we talked about different incentives, we talked about different tools, and they were like, no, we do not want to deal with the zoning process. We do not want to deal with going to a DAB and a neighbor upset. And there, I mean, we've got to find some middle ground for it. We can't just say yes to everything. We can't just say no to everything, but we've got to work together to be able to come up with solutions that work for the property owner as well as the community.
All right. Well, we've gone through about half an hour here of our questions, and now we get to the fun part. At this point, I will be opening the floor up to members of the community who are here tonight joining us. And if you wish to speak, please start making your way toward the microphone here at the front of the room. Feel free to line up there. A few ground rules. This forum is primarily a journalistic exercise, so I will ask that you please be respectful of the candidates. This is not a political rally, so please refrain from making speeches in support of one candidate or the other, and please frame your questions as questions.
Thank you, Dion.
And hold on, not quite sure yet. And third, the focus of tonight's forum is housing and housing-related issues, so please keep your questions on topic. And with that, John Todd.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, candidates, for being here. When we hear about affordable housing, we usually hear about all sorts of government programs designed to stimulate and create the solutions. Is there a role for the private sector to get involved? And if you get re-elected, do you have a plan to involve the builders, the realtors, the developers, or modelers? What could we turn the private sector loose on solving this problem?
Yes, in fact, we're not going to do responses on these questions, so just a minute each, please.
I do believe that there's a private sector opportunity, but it's got to be put out on an RFP, and it's got to be available for everybody to apply. You know, we've got to be able to ensure that it's a fair process. I've done the John Todd tour, went out with a couple hours and looked through all the abandoned houses here in Wichita, and I agree, but we've got to understand which ones are cost prohibitive to fix up and which ones aren't. There's a lot of, John, you and I have talked about this a lot, there's a lot of differences in construction practices in prior to World War II and after World War II. If it's pre-World War II, it's maybe plaster and sheetrock or plaster and lath board versus a sheetrock wall. It's a floor furnace and a window air conditioner versus central heat and air. There's a lot of differences in those properties, and we need to truly assess which ones are worth rebuilding, and if not, is there a better plan for that property?
I think you hit on the exact reason why the county would use RHID, because we can help with developers who wouldn't see that they would make money on a certain project. We can come in and say that we can be a part of that and make sure that these housing units are going to be there. I know that the city of Wichita is kind of leading on some of these things, and they're already working with organizations like Habitat for Humanity, and they are going in and fixing up properties so that people can have home ownership, that they can create that generational wealth for their families, and we can improve our community. So I do absolutely think that there is a place for private industry, and I think it's just going to be a true test of collaboration, because that is exactly what RHID was made for.
And the next question, if you could please state your name and ask your question.
Sure. Hello, I'm Nicole. Do you support protections for renters from retaliatory evictions by landlords?
Yeah,
Sarah.
Absolutely. I think right now the city of Wichita recently passed something similar to say that you cannot retaliate. I think as Sedgwick County and the unincorporated area is growing, that maybe it's time that the county starts looking at ways that we address some of those as well. But I think without a doubt that we need to make sure that we're taking care of our folks, and we need to make sure that people who are renting understand their rights, and that they know if something's not being taken care of, that they have the ability to request that, and if it's not getting done, that they can break that lease too. So I think there's a lot of education that needs to happen there.
Jeff?
I kind of touched on this earlier. I think the city does a decent job of trying to enforce the Landlord-Tenant Act, but we need to make sure that we're working with the county and, you know, just following the state guidelines for one. And a lot of it's an education too, for both landlords and tenants, to ensure that everyone understands both sides of the law.
Okay. Next speaker.
Hi guys, Esau Freeman, SEIU Local 513. I know that in the city of Wichita, the housing department workers and people dealing with a lot of these things are union members. And as the county wades into this, one, will you support allowing the county workers in these departments to unionize? And two, what will you do to ensure that union labor is used in the projects that are being built and funded?
And I believe that's Jeff.
Yep.
Yes.
I come from a union family. My dad was a union member for 45 years. We were both shop stewards out at Cessna, and I do still today believe in bargaining unit. I believe that it gives employees an opportunity to be able to bargain for fair worker rights. It's funny because, you know, 30 years ago we used to hear, well, unions are a thing of the past. Now you read, you know, they're not anymore. They're out there to ensure that those employees are taken care of. And I would be in favor of looking at language and looking into it further about, you know, how we work with union companies and how we score them versus working with a non-union.
Yeah, I absolutely think we should. I grew up in a union machinist household, so unions are just kind of a way of life in my family. My husband was a union leader for a while there too. I think as we're looking at functional consolidation, that opens up and gives us a little bit more room to say, well, if we're going to consolidate and these people are unionized, then how do we not allow our folks then to unionize as well? So I think that's going to be a part of that conversation. I've been a strong advocate for our fire department to get their bargaining rights reinstated. We've had not the most support. I think we were getting there, but due to unforeseen circumstances this past year, we didn't get there. But as soon as there's an opportunity again, then we are going to start having those conversations. I am fully supportive of our unions and our labor unions. I think that any organization, right, is only as good as the people who are providing those services, and I think that we need to make sure that they're taken care of first and foremost in any organization that they work in.
Okay. The next question, Sarah, you'll answer first.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I'm just a student here at Penns. But my question is, how can residents of Sedgwick County collaborate with the County Commission to address housing challenges And what steps would you take to increase public awareness and engagement around these issues, encouraging citizens to contribute in making their district more supportive for renters and first-time home buyers?
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Can you repeat the question,
Yes.
please?
It's kind of like two parts. But my first question is, how can residents of the county collaborate with the county commission to address housing challenges? And what steps would you guys take personally to increase public awareness and engagement around these issues?
Okay, I think, first and foremost, it's very important that you're telling us. I mean, at the end of the day, you are our bosses, so you need to tell us what's important to you, and if you have ideas, I mean, we're not going to think of everything, so if you have ideas, bring those to the table. One thing that I've done is the County Commission and District 2 didn't have a Citizens Advisory Board, so I had that created, so that way I could really get direct input from our community members and invite other community members to take part, because they're all public meetings, so I can really get a pulse of where things are. I don't think there's no such thing as too much involvement with community. So if you ever have any questions or you want to get more engaged, we can find a place to plug you in, but really the more we can get, the better.
I appreciate your question, and I appreciate you being here tonight. We need more young people to step up into these leadership roles. And a lot of times I've had someone that call me with a problem, and I end up creating a relationship with them, and then I appoint them to a DAB or appoint them to, some other board or something. There's plenty of opportunities out there for people that need to be involved, and you do need to be involved, and we need to hear your voice, and sometimes your voice has to be loud for us to hear it.
Okay, next question. And when you ask a question, please remain at the microphone, just in case we need clarification or a repeat. So please state your name and ask the question.
Good evening, I'm Christy Kirk, and I'm curious to know how holding property tax revenues neutral will affect county services.
Jeff, you were first.
Yeah, I think this is an opportunity for the collaboration between the city and the county. I did vote to keep the budgets revenue neutral whenever I was on the city council, and I still believe that. We've got to ensure that we are holding our budget tight. Right now, if you look at, what's going on in people's homes right now, whenever you hear about quality of life starts at home. Do you have groceries? Do you have gas in your car? Do you have enough money to pay your bills each month? That's where it starts. Everybody's tightening their belts on their houses, and they expect government to do the same. I'd ask you, how many of you guys are out there are building onto your houses right now, remodeling your kitchens, remodeling your bathrooms, putting in a man cave or she shed? People aren't doing those things right now because money is too tight. They're having to make cuts at home, and we have to make those serious cuts as a government as well.
I think revenue neutral is really quite irresponsible, to be perfectly honest. When you're an organization of almost 2,900 employees, to cut, what that would have meant for us this year is we would have had to cut $16 million from the budget. That means we're cutting jobs. That means we're going to cut into public safety. And that also means that the staff that stays, you're not going to get a raise. And we have put so much effort into prioritizing our staff to then turn around and say, actually, just kidding, we're going to cut your job, or you're just not going to get a raise for a while. To expect anybody to stay is just not, it's not the reality of the situation. I mean, we saw what happened at the state when they tried to just take huge cuts and the chaos that created, to the point that they had to then turn around and do the biggest tax increase that we've seen in Kansas history. So there are responsible ways to go about cutting taxes, but that's really going to come more when it comes to functional consolidation and finding ways that we can lower the overall burden of taxes, and not just taking a hammer to our budget and thinking that that's going to be a responsible way about going about it.
Okay, next question. Your name, sir?
Yes, I'm J.C. Moore from Hayesville. I was wondering if either of you own rental property, and if so, how many units, and will it give you a conflict of interest when you make decisions about housing policy?
Sarah, that would go to you first.
This will be a very quick answer. No, I do not.
Okay. Jeff?
My wife, we own and manage several properties, and never had a problem abiding by the Landlord-Tenant Act in the past.
Thank you. And next question, please.
I'm Diane Britton. How do you think RHIDs the reinvestment housing incentive districts should be used in Sedgwick County, and what kinds of projects should be approved in the future?
And Jeff, I believe you're first, yes.
So I kind of brought that up earlier. I do believe it's one of the strongest tools that we have to utilize right now, and we've got to focus on areas that developers are not developing in. You know, that tells me that there's, you know, something's wrong in the market or something's going on in the economy. Why aren't they choosing this neighborhood? And I think sometimes we've got to look at the whole block. You know, sometimes you just can't revitalize one house. It's got to be a neighborhood at a time. And I think the first start should be, let's start out with some zip codes. Look at, you know, and I would like to gear towards some of the lower income zip codes and look at what kind of incentives could we have. You know, in the past, you looked at some of the old incentives that they had where, you know, maybe it was, if they were clearing a property, we would take care of the dump fees, or we would freeze the property taxes for 5 years, something like that. We've got to be able to incentivize these areas that are not developing. One of my biggest memories on the city council is whenever Carl Brewer, at his last meeting, he went through and opened our eyes that at that time we had $500 million worth of infrastructure that was going to be needed attended to. Now that's been 12, 13 years ago, and you look at right now, these streets that are crumbling, the water pipes are beyond their economical life, the sewer. So how are we going to go through there and special assess these older neighborhoods where the properties have dilapidated? We've got to ensure that we've got a decent property on there.
Jeff, I'm going to call time on you. Sarah, please.
Yeah, our HIDs are going to be incredibly important to the housing stock issue that we're seeing. Right now, the law is so broad that you can use this money for just about anything. And so when we first started having the conversation with the county on what do we want to see if we were going to approve something, we agreed that it needed to be infill, it needed to be for low income, and it needed to be not suburban sprawl, and there has to be a but for. There has to be a way that's saying if this would not happen unless our HID came to help. So there are many different ways that we're trying to limit that, because we don't want this to be a free-for-all for anybody to be able to come in and get tax dollars if the project could be feasible without it. I mean, we hear a lot from folks who are on fixed incomes who are really struggling with the burden of taxes. And so the last thing that I would want to do is to say, okay, well, you guys are really going to have to cover the taxes for this project that could have happened without this incentive.
Okay, thank you.
And next questioner.
John Whitmer from KNSS Radio. The recent mill levy cut amounts to $4.14 on a $100,000 home. Meanwhile, in the last year, the County Commission once again exceeded revenue neutral rates. On average, 60% of county taxpayers have seen a 10% increase in property taxes to as high as 28% increase in property taxes last year alone. That's on top of the previous year with the same approximate numbers. How do you plan to address rapidly increasing property tax relief for Wichita and county taxpayers?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and one that we're working on. We did cut the mill levy 2 years in a row, and what's
$4.14.
I appreciate that, and we're going to continue looking at other opportunities to do this. Now, what would be the most beneficial if all we're going to do is cut the mill levy rate? And thing that from the bench we have implored our cities and school districts to be a part of is to also do the same thing, because it's not going to make a huge impact unless we're all working together. I know that the county, we're the lowest mill levy that we've been in over 30 years, and not every, actually most local governments are not cutting their mill levy. At the end of the day, what really is going to make this a better, to really be able to cut those taxes is functional consolidation. That's the key to all of this. And so right now, we actually have the political will of both the city and the county to work on efforts to do that going forward. But you're right, I mean, this county cannot control everything, and we cannot come in and expect to say that we're gonna fix all these problems. It's gotta be collaborative, and unless our partners across at the city are gonna help us with that, then we can only do what we can do.
Jeff?
Property tax relief starts at the assessment process. We've got to ensure we have a fair assessment property, a market value, and it's consistent with your neighbor's property, with other like properties, with other market conditions. That's the real thing that we've got to address right now. And then you look at, a lot of times that assessment value, they'll just cast a 8 to 10% increase. Well, you know what happens when you do that down in South Wichita? You know, things are a little bit different in South Wichita. We're more Bionic Burger than we are Chester's. We're more of working class, more of wanting to use our tax dollars for ourselves and take care of our own family, and the government second. So what we've got to do is we've got to ensure that we have a realistic value that's out there, and then once we have that value, we can continue to work for collaboration opportunities. But we cannot put the false value that we have out there right now, and I'll say it again, the commercial value, 99% of them are turned down. People may think, well, that's commercial property owners. You know what that commercial, that means you're gonna pay more at the grocery store. That means you're gonna pay more at the gas station. That means you're gonna pay more at anything you purchase from them. Because just like a landlord, they're gonna pass that on to you, just like a consumer business.
Okay. Next question, sir.
Yeah, Jason Platter. My question for you kind of has to do with the housing and with our homeless situation. Across the U.S., they've gone through, if you look at Nashville, San Antonio, Salt Lake City, even Kansas City at the Veterans Home, the country's starting to utilize the tiny homes as a viable solution, both homeless and our Affordable Housing Act. Where's Sedgwick County's view on that?
You know, we had a tiny homes addition here a few years ago. I don't know that it ever really came to fruition. I think that anything's on the table right now. Whenever we start talking about the importance of that lot density, well, tiny homes fit into that. It's just got to make sure that we are in the character of the neighborhood or the character of the area, and we're not infringing on someone else's property rights.
And I think that's really going to come down to, once we get the results from the study on housing inventory and what we actually need, then it's going to open the conversation of what kind of housing do we need and how do we get there. And I don't think there's anything wrong with looking into tiny houses and other things that would be beneficial, but until we have that data, it would just be really hard to say that this is the direction that we need to go.
I'm Aiden Mays. I go to school here. I'm just wondering if you guys have any plans for housing within the next 5 or 10 years, just really structured plans that you guys have that you guys want to implement.
Well, that's a really good question. Housing plans, again, the city has typically taken housing under their purview. So we're really trying to be at the table as best as we can, but also not wanting to step on what they're trying to do, understanding that they're leading that. I don't think there's anything that I can say that the county has in their plans for the next 5 years that's going to address that specific thing, but I do think that there's a lot of things that we're doing kind of behind the scenes. Some of the things that I already touched on, like trying to help with keeping insurance rates lower or trying to cut those taxes as much as we can, that will help with housing. But at the end of the day, we just don't have a plan right now that's going to solve housing.
I hope that the county can take more of a leadership role than what we had at the city, and because we tossed around a lot of ideas and they didn't really work out. We had a lot of developers come to us and say, hey, the city's got this piece of ground that nobody's really going to develop. They wanted to go in there, build affordable housing. Maybe it's 2 or 3 bedroom, 1 bath units without a garage or something like that on some of this property that's not being developed. And I think we need to go back and look at some of those issues and try to have, because we've got to have affordable housing. You know, it's just key, because, you know, you look at our labor force, a lot of it's built on that lower income, and if we don't have affordable housing in them, we're not going to attract the necessary workers that we need, especially in our district.
Hi, I'm Jalen Reed, student here at Friends University. The question is, how do you plan to involve community members in discussions and decisions about housing development?
Jeff, I believe you have the next.
In my previous world out at Textron, I was a Six Sigma black belt, and I did a lot of facilitation, did a lot of surveys, did a lot of studies based on those. I have always used survey guides like that to help me make my decisions. A lot of it's polling with my newsletters, a lot of it's, you know, certain people in neighborhoods that I'll call and ask questions, but I always want to do everything I can to engage the areas, engage the reason, and make sure that, you know, we're hearing every voice there, because a lot of times I've been very blessed to have this opportunity to have this year off and kind of be outside of the bubble, and it's great out there speaking with people, and things are a lot different than what you think when you're just running around with other electeds and other legislators.
I think it really comes down to being as open and transparent as we possibly can. There have been times that we just need to make sure that anytime we're having a conversation that impacts the community, that we're bringing community members in so we can hear from everybody and not just necessarily the people that are always at the table. There have been times where I've been able to create a task force to bring community members in on that specific problem, and then the results that we get from that are so much better because it's not just the same people that are doing the same thing every day, but having that outside input is really helpful. So I think with housing or with any problem, really, the more input we can get, the more transparent we can be with that, and the more public meetings we can have is going to be helpful to the overall vision and the goal that we want to get to.
Marixandra Alvarez, that was loud. Immigrant families face housing challenges, including lack of affordable housing, health hazards, and information alone. How would you engage with minorities to find solutions for more affordable housing and to get them more informed?
Well, I think education is critical, and making sure that it's done in a language that is understood. For a long time, our services were only put out in English. Well, we have a lot of folks in our communities that don't speak English, and so that's not accessible to everybody, and we have to do our very best and not just say we're going to do it, but actually put the dollars behind making sure that we're doing that. Engaging with organizations like the Hispanic Chamber is really important as well, because you guys have your thumb on the pulse, right? Like, you know what our community needs. I can tell you what I think Latino community needs, but I can't tell you what a Vietnamese community needs or any other groups. And so we have to really engage with everybody and make things as accessible as we possibly can.
Yeah, I agree that we've got to be out there working with, especially the minority organizations, but ensuring that we have inclusion, ensuring that everybody has a voice, that we've reached out. And we've heard from other groups, whether it's English speaking, non-English speaking, making sure that we have material, we have teaching opportunities for everyone, regardless of your race, your gender, anything.
We have reached the 7 o'clock hour, but we still have 3 questions from the public here. Are you amenable to sticking around for a few more minutes and taking care of those? Okay, great. Sir, state your question.
Good evening, Sarah and Jeff. I'm Michael Andra. I own the Wichita Union Stockyards and also 107.9 Country Radio. My concern, has been a lot of talk tonight about appraisals and the appraiser's office, and I heard the statement 99% failure when a taxpayer goes up to them. My concern goes much deeper than that. My concern goes to corruption and multiple statute violations within the Sedgwick County Appraiser's Office to punish...
Sir, I'm sorry. Do you have a question for the panel? Okay.
My concern is to punish property owners that appeal their tax appraisals. Now, I brought this, my question is, how are we going to address this? Because I had a meeting April 10th with Sarah and the county managers, Tom Stoltz, and nothing happened about it. They're absolutely violating state statutes, and now I have to go to Topeka.
I'm going to ask you
Topeka.
I'm going to ask you to
battle them because
sir,
of the corruption in the appraiser's office.
Sir, this is becoming personal with your own personal problem, and that's not really
it's a county problem.
That's not really the purpose here tonight.
Yes, it is.
But thank you. Next question. Go ahead.
In 2023, eviction numbers in Sedgwick County reached a five-year high. and what is being done to help decrease those numbers?
Jeff, I believe you have the first go at this.
I had not heard that they had reached a 5-year high. You know, I think a lot of it is just people are out of money at the end of the month. I mean, you know, I used to volunteer down at the Lord's Diner, and you participate in some of these organizations, and you're around folks, and you realize that they just run out of money. I think education is one of the key points, because a lot of times people just leave, and they don't realize they have rights. And I think a lot of people, both the tenants and the landlords, need to be educated, again, about the Kansas Tenant Landlord Act, because a lot of people don't know that the rights that they have, and they just get up and leave, and unfortunately that eviction follows them on to the next one.
So the city did pass an ordinance to prevent landlords from being able to evict renters in a retaliatory way. And I have mentioned this already, but it's worth repeating that as the unincorporated county continues to grow, it would probably be a good idea that we start looking at passing our own ordinances in that certain way. Things that we are doing now with RHID and trying to increase the housing stock, trying to find those functional consolidation ways that we can lower that tax burden, and doing things like fire and maintaining the big ditch that allows insurance rates to be lower, will all kind of add into keeping rates as low as possible by not increasing things for the property owners. So we can't guarantee that property owners are not going to increase rates for renters, but we can. Those are the things that we can do that are in our control that will help that.
Okay, and our final question tonight.
Hello, Janet Parton. Did you or would you have supported the Goddard RHID?
That came to us at the county, and we denied that request. They were already getting some incentives through the city of Goddard, and the group that was putting in for that request still owed back property taxes, and so that's one thing that we look at. The other part is that apartment complex, we're seeing other apartment complexes like that being built in suburban areas across the county, and they're able to get it done without government incentives. And so we did not feel that it met the criteria that we put in place for infill, affordable housing, and those sort of things, and not suburban sprawl. And so because it didn't meet those criteria, we denied that.
I know Goddard needs that housing bad. I didn't have a vote on this one, and I probably wouldn't have voted it down, but I had a lot of questions that come up, and particularly about the value of the vacant land before they built on it, and some of the mechanics of the deal. I don't know, I didn't have all the inside information, but I wasn't quite comfortable with that. But what I would have done is I would have went back to the table and tried to find an alternative, and how could we have done that project? Could we have cut back the incentive? Could we have, could we have had more control over it to ensure, it was given the community was getting the good out of all those years of tax deferment. So don't know that I voted against it, but I would have went back to the drawing board and tried to figure out a solution.
Okay. Well, I think we've reached the point for our close. Your question, sir, was a personal issue of. So, do you wish to?
I don't know. I don't know directly about it, Mike. But if I'm elected, I will continue to ask a lot of questions. I do know that it's just like police officers. Sometimes you have a bad police officer, and I know that there's some appraisers that go out there and target people. I don't know if it's just coincidence or not, but whenever I started raising flags about all this property tax issues, I look outside of my window, and there's a Sedgwick County property tax appraiser sitting right outside my window this afternoon. So maybe that's just coincidence, but I will have a lot of questions to ask about this.
This almost sounds kind of conspiracy. If you have a direct issue about a certain issue, please come talk to us. I know that we have had those conversations, and I wish that we could make everybody happy and do everything that we possibly could, but unfortunately, there are ordinance and regulations in place, and at the end of the day, the appraiser works for the state, and not Sedgwick County commissioners. So our hands really are tied when it comes to appraisal, because we are not a part of that. That is a state and appraiser-led deal. It is not a county commissioner thing. And again, if you have a certain issue, we can go and talk to the appraisers, but I cannot overturn anything. That is well outside of my ability to do things. And I'm sorry, sir, I'm very sorry that you did not get exactly what.
Sir, please sit down.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
We did talk about code enforcement, and we had everybody at the table that needed to be there, and then they even went and toured your facility and did everything that they could. And I know that your history and the county's history don't necessarily match up. So I wish, again, that we could do everything that everybody wanted, but unfortunately, government cannot do that.
Okay, we're through with this now. Jeff, you have the first opportunity for the closing statement. Sarah had chosen the last opportunity. She chose to. She got choice of the closing statement, and she chose to go second. So.
I've been very blessed with the opportunity to represent a majority of this district for almost 11 years, and we got a lot accomplished whenever my time was on the council, and I want to continue to serve this community. As I go out and knock doors, it makes me want to serve this community that much more. There are a lot of people out there hurting right now, and as I talk about being outside of the bubble, I've been outside of the bubble since January, and I'm out there talking to people, and people are hurting. They're, just trying to make ends meet. And, again, we talk about the quality of life. Your quality of life all starts at your house. Do you have enough money to put groceries on the table? Do you have enough to pay your utilities? Do you have enough to put gas in your car? We've got to ensure that we're doing everything we can to work with these taxpayers and just try to get them through this, because this is a very difficult time. I don't know any business at any level, anyone that's succeeding right now in this climate, and a lot of it goes back to taxes. So I'd appreciate this opportunity. I'd appreciate the opportunity to continue to serve this community in the future.
First, I just want to thank you all for joining us tonight. It's been really great to be able to have this conversation, and I think it's really important that people are engaging to know who wants to be representing you, and so to have that education is really important. At the end of the day, like I said, I ran originally because I wanted to leave our community better than I found it for my kids, and that's my whole reason I'm doing this. I love this community enough to live here, to raise my children here. My kids go to school here, and I think it's really important that you have a pulse of what's going on in this community when you live here. So I'm really grateful to each and every one of you for coming. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for allowing us to speak with you, and I hope you all have a great night and get home safely. Thank you.
All right. Thank you to our candidates. Thanks to everyone who helped with the forum tonight, and thank you all for attending. I think we've found some facts here tonight. So, have a nice evening.